Produced in high definition by Fox 50. Viewer discretion is advised.
About an hour or so ago, we located her body.
It's a horrible crime. It does not get any worse than what happened in that case.
I was thinking, not Brittany Willis.
It completely blows my mind that something like this would happen to a person like her.
At around 8 p.m. last night, a couple of people did come in, provide some information. Following up on that information ultimately led to the arrest.
Kenneth Maurice Meeks.
Because I was used to getting my own way, and then when I didn't get my way, I didn't like it.
James Arthur Johnson.
I thought we was going to have to go to trial, and then we was going to see who was telling the truth, either me or him.
And a Julian Dean.
They're going to let one person go, the white boy.
You can't help but think about what that family's going through.
Just wanted to see if I could get your thoughts on what happened today.
Hopefully this will be resolved one way or the other.
There's so much emotion in this town and this county about this case.
As a resident of Wilson, this tragedy has torn us apart.
You've got a town here with about 50,000 people in it. If the community were not upset about it, I think then there would be something wrong.
Whoever did it is evil. They're gonna burn in hell.
You have to understand the broad scope of Wilson. They were out for blood.
He still needs to stay in jail for longer.
We cannot have a system that produces a lynching.
They're trying to fight and say that he didn't commit the crime, there was no DNA, but he was there. So that was his choice.
Those 2 nights before he went to the police, he did not sleep in his room.
If he had immediately gone to law enforcement and said, this man forced me to do that, he probably would have been in a much better position.
Oh, it took 3 days. Why did it take 3 days? That's what they're playing on.
Free James Johnson!
He went in and did what he thought was the right thing and still does.
Free James Johnson!
Our position is that all the charges need to be dismissed and James needs to be honored as a hero.
He withheld evidence and it was wrong.
What some meant for evil, God meant for good. James is our Joseph, and we present him now.
It's not about James Johnson. It's about whatever justice is for Brittany.
You know, it wasn't racial or anything. The whole case has just been made into something that it's not.
Keep coming over there.
The James Johnson case is a major focus right now in the nation with the national NAACP. I said you need to be a member of the NAACP, 7 cents a day.
As far as where the NAACP comes into it, there's a fine line that they walk between watchdogging and interfering or inciting conflict.
Some of the most divisive moments I've seen are when the NAACP has been out in a large group.
Young man was punished for courageously coming forward. Critical in. We intend to challenge the activities of Assistant DA Wolf.
The district attorney's office in this county is not very forthcoming with information.
A prosecutor should say very, very little about a case. And I know the public doesn't always like that.
This DA pursued him and lied to the public, lied to his family.
He's the face of the prosecution in the courtroom. He's the easiest target.
At this point, there needs to be a fresh set of eyes on this entire case.
At the time of Brittany Willis's murder, it was an undeveloped subdivision.
And they've chosen someone who is a retired prosecutor.
That the public know that the person who is going to make a decision in this case is going to make it without outside pressure.
Free James Johnson!
And I stand today still not guilty of any involvement.
But he was there and he saw what happened. And the only time he came forward was when there was a reward.
There was some conversation about the reward money.
We never took the position that he was Mr. Clean. If he helped clean up the car, he shouldn't have done that. It is a criminal offense.
I would caution people to continue the reporting as though James and Kenneth did this general cleaning of the car. That's not what happened.
He shouldn't have helped clean up the car. That's illegal.
Free James Johnson.
Fighting outside of the courthouse.
Free James Johnson.
This is a turning point.
In the streets.
In Wilson.
And in the media.
It's a turning point in North Carolina.
Wilson.
It's going to come to light, everything, so.
We just want the court system to know that there is another side.
We're going to wait to see what happens with all the trial situation.
You've got the tragedy with the murder, you've got the tragedy with the incarceration, and furthermore, if it never comes to trial, I think that could be almost as big a tragedy as the initial crime itself.
We have been waiting and we'll continue to wait.
Good evening, I'm Gerald Owens. Welcome to NC Wanted. We're at the Wilson County Courthouse in downtown Wilson because tonight we're expanding our coverage of fugitives on the run to include our justice system, which must deal with those fugitives once they're captured. And it's here in Wilson where one local case has put North Carolina's justice system on trial. The victim in this case was 17-year-old Brittany Tyler Willis, a well-liked young woman who in the summer of 2004 became the target of a carjacking and robbery that led to her rape and murder. For family and friends, this tragedy inflicted emotional wounds that worsened when 3 Wilson teenagers were identified as suspects. But locals tell us this case has become an endless ordeal that's preventing those private wounds from healing and spreading a cancerous divide that may linger in Wilson for at least a generation.
She loves soccer. She loves playing with people, playing with her friends.
Brittany was a popular student. She was on the volleyball team, the soccer team, in the Key Club, and on the yearbook staff.
She was all around a very good girl. She did good in school. She was a really good soccer player. And she had a social life also. She had so many friends, and everybody liked her.
She was the most caring, fun girl I've ever met. She loved to just ride around with the windows down, music loud. She's the kind of person who lived for today.
June 28, 2004. On the final afternoon of her life, Brittany Willis has graduated from Hunt High School and is preparing for her freshman year at Peace College in Raleigh. She's borrowed her parents' SUV to stop by the Brentwood Shopping Center to exchange a graduation gift.
I was in the shock phase. I'm getting towards the anger, mad phase. Anyone that could do that to a person like her, it makes me very mad.
The last place she was seen was at Brentwood Shopping Center. The car was found approximately 1/2 mile from there. And then late this afternoon, her body was found a 1/2 mile back this way. Got about a triangle of a mile and a half.
Any reports from the medical examiner?
We've not gotten any reports back from the medical examiner. We've got assistance from the SBI. We've had assistance from the United States Marshal Service. We're still spending time around the shopping centers to see if anybody may have seen anything.
It used to be that people felt safe to go out, but now we don't feel safe at all.
By July 1st, 2004, missing posters are replaced with reward posters, offering $20,000 for information leading to an arrest.
At around 8 p.m. last night, a couple of people did come in, provide some information. Following up on that information ultimately led to the arrest.
There was some conversation about the reward money.
Friday, July 2nd, 2004, Wilson police arrest and charge Kenneth Maurice Meeks Jr., Julian Tyson Deans, and James Arthur Johnson for crimes against Brittany Willis. On Thursday night before the arrest, the father of James Johnson says his son, along with friend Julian Deans, told him they knew who killed Brittany.
If you see something wrong, you should report it. Okay, on July 1st, 2004, my son followed my rule, not the street's rule, and he went in and did what he thought was the right thing and still does. This is going to tell you about fear. Those 2 nights before he went to the police, he did not sleep in his room. His younger brother slept in another room. He actually went up and curled in the bed behind him. Oh, it took 3 days. Why did it take 3 days? That's what they're playing on.
It was Johnson's 3-day wait and details in his story that made investigators suspicious. Kenneth Meeks had been providing an alibi for Johnson, and their stories weren't matching.
We was pretty close for a while. We hung around each other every day.
In the beginning, they didn't know, all they knew was what was in the stories.
To get to the truth, investigators tell us they sometimes pit one suspect against the other. After James Johnson went to the police, it's alleged the investigators went back to Meeks and told him his friend Johnson had turned him in. Then Meeks reportedly changed his story, blaming Johnson for everything that happened to Brittany Willis.
Well, when I first heard about it, I was upset by it.
Kenneth gave several statements in the beginning. Kenneth felt that James snitched on him, so he was going to implicate him.
Court records show statements from witnesses and defendants kept changing over a period of days, weeks, and months, and in Kenneth Meeks' case, years.
People have come up to me and told me, like, well, we done heard about 30 stories of what happened. I mean, I've heard about 30 stories too, so I mean, just know the truth will come to the light.
To get a sense of what investigators were dealing with, we've produced a recreation using actors as defendants and witnesses. The dialogue you'll hear is a collection of the actual statements given to investigators, along with witness stand testimony quoted directly from court records. What you won't hear will be the official statements by James Johnson, as they have not been released into public record.
State your full name.
Julian Tyson Deans.
Age at the time of Brittany's murder?
19.
Where do you work?
Food line. Cut grass too. Ain't got hardly no expenses because I live in an old trailer all to myself. My bike gets me around.
All right, go ahead with your statement, please.
Well, Ken Meeks called me like Saturday or Sunday and asked me how much he could sell a gun for. I asked him what kind of gun, and Ken told me a .380.
That was the last weekend of June 2004, just before the murder of Brittany Willis?
Yeah.
The crimes against Brittany Willis happened on Monday, June 28, 2004.
I said I was with my mother on Monday.
So what happened the day after the murder?
Well, Tuesday morning, about 10:30 or 11, James Johnson called me at home and woke me up. He said, "Hey, I got something crazy to tell you." James told me that Ken killed someone. I didn't believe him. James wouldn't call any names over the phone. He said, "You know who I'm talking about."
Go on.
I asked James if he had any money. He said, yeah. I was gonna get up with James and we're gonna go buy a bag of marijuana, to smoke. I told him I'd be down there in a little bit.
Full name, please.
Kenneth Maurice Meeks Jr.
Age at the time of Brittany's murder?
16.
What school did you go to?
I used to go to Pike High near my house. I dropped out. I wanted to move in with my sister in Durham.
Is it your sister's place in Durham where you stole the Lorson .380 caliber semi-automatic pistol?
Yeah, but it was my sister's boyfriend gun though.
Tell us the first statement you gave to an investigator about what you did the day of Brittany's murder.
First thing I told that SBI dude that came to my house, I told him I was playing video games, Grand Theft Auto.
Until when?
About 2:30 in the afternoon, I think. I talked on the phone with my girlfriend for a while, and then James came over.
James Johnson?
Yeah, about 4 o'clock. I told the investigator dude that me and James played some more Grand Theft Auto.
So on the day of the murder, Monday, June 28th, how long did you play Grand Theft Auto for the second time? What did you tell that investigator?
An hour and a half or so. I guess it was about 5:30 when we went outside and talked. I came in late around 11. James stayed outside talking to AJ and some other dudes.
So when the investigators first asked you what happened to Brittany Willis, what did you tell them then?
I think I said it's a good feeling the boyfriend did it. In most cases, it is the boyfriend. I think that's what I said.
So regarding the crimes against Brittany Willis, when you were first talked to about it by the police, you told them you didn't know anything about it, right?
Yes.
And you also told police at one point that Julian Deans and James Johnson were with you when Brittany was alive, is that correct?
Yes.
And you also told them it was you and James Johnson shot Brittany Willis, correct?
Yes.
Now you're saying it was you, by yourself.
Yes.
And with regard to specifically with the rape, you first said no rape occurred.
Yes.
Then at one point you said you and James Johnson raped Miss Willis.
Yes.
And in your third statement about the rape, you said you alone raped Miss Willis.
Yes.
So in a period of more than a year, actually closer to 2 years, you've said 4 different things about the murder, 3 different things about the rape. That's 7 different statements. Do I have that right?
I suppose.
And which statements would you have us believe, Mr. Meeks?
The last ones.
Mr. Deans, the day after the murder, Tuesday, when you rode your bike to see James at his house, did you and James smoke the marijuana you mentioned?
Nah, we just went back to James's room.
What did James Johnson tell you about his activities with Kenneth Meeks the previous day, that's Monday afternoon, June 28th, when Brittany Willis was kidnapped, raped, and robbed and murdered?
James told me when Ken got the girl from Food Line, he blindfolded her. James said Ken called him that he would be over at James' house in 15 minutes.
Say nothing. Yeah, James, I'll be in about 15 minutes.
And he thought he heard Ken tell somebody to shut up, don't say nothing. That's what James told me.
He said he heard that over the phone.
Yeah.
What happened when Meeks showed up to James Johnson's house driving Willis's SUV?
James told me he got in the SUV with Ken. James told me Ken is always showing up in girls' cars, that they just ride around.
Mm-hmm. What happened next?
James told me they went down the road to the construction area off Brentwood. James told me Ken said he just killed a girl. James said he didn't believe him. And James told me they rode back there and he saw the girl. He saw the girl on the ground and her breast was hanging out. James said he wanted to leave. They went to the car wash on Airport Boulevard. James said he wiped the fingerprints off the car. He said he used little wipes.
After James and Ken wiped their fingerprints from the car, they abandoned it at Wilson Woods Complex, is that right?
That's right. Hey, I promise, I never went back there to where that girl was.
State your full name for the record, please.
Anthony Horton Jr. My friends call me AJ.
Mr. Horton, how did you come to know Kenneth Meeks, Julian Deans, and James Johnson?
School.
Is that Fike High School, Mr. Horton?
Yes.
And where were you living on the day of Brittany Willis's murder? That's Monday, June 28, 2004?
About 25 feet from Ken Meeks' house.
On the afternoon of the murder, what time did you see Kenneth Meeks in his yard?
Between 5 and 6 o'clock.
Anyone with him?
James Johnson.
Did Kenneth Meeks and James Johnson tell you what happened to Brittany Willis?
Yes.
And what did they tell you, Mr. Horton?
Well, Ken didn't say nothing about a rape, but James Johnson did. James said he went back to see the body and her breasts were out.
What else?
James and Ken told me they drove back to the body and got stuff back, like the shirt.
The shirt. Tell us about that, Mr. Horton.
James told me he took Ken's bloody shirt off the girl. It was covering the girl's body. And Ken tried to cover up the body with some brush.
All right, Mr. Meeks, you've given us several statements over the past couple of years. The statement you're about to give is the last statement we have on record. It's what you told Wilson Police in a polygraph exam on June 19, 2006. The result was no opinion, and you had been taking a high dose of an antidepressant. What was that?
150 milligrams of Wellbutrin.
150 milligrams of Wellbutrin. All right, go ahead.
I told on James because James told on me.
But the only thing James did was help me clean the car after what I did. That was Monday late afternoon, June 28th, 2004. I was waiting for James in front of the soda machine. Then I saw this girl drive up with the most expensive car in the parking lot. I watched her walk inside the store. She looked like she had money. I had a black bandana on because I didn't want no beef with no gangs, but I had my silver .380 pistol just in case. Look, I didn't have no money. I just wanted to rob her and nothing else. When she came out, I acted like I was going to the car beside hers. She closed the door and I opened it right back up and told her to scoot over. She asked me can she walk around, and I said no. So she climbed over the console and got into the passenger side. I started the car up and drove to the construction site near James' house. It's really close.
Shut up.
She asked where we was going, and I said not to worry about it. I don't know why I didn't rob her in the parking lot. When we got to the construction site,
Give me your purse.
No.
I told her 2 times to give me her pocketbook.
Give me your purse.
No.
I was pointing a gun at her the whole time. She didn't give me her pocketbook, so I leaned over and get it, and then she hit me in my nose. My adrenaline was pumping, so I really didn't feel it.
Broke my nose.
Then she opened the door to get out. Her feet were on the ground because she left her seat. That's when I shot her in the back. I got out and ran around to tell her to get back in the car. She was looking where the bullet came out in front.
Take your shirt off.
I told her to give me her shirt so I can wipe my nose. She had a swimsuit top underneath her shirt. I told her to get back in the car and she did. I started driving to Brentwood and I stopped at Ward Boulevard. I was planning to take her to the hospital, but I realized she could identify me. So I turned around and went back.
Why are you taking me back?
When we got back to the field, I told her to get in the back seat.
Take your clothes off.
And I threw all the papers on the ground. That's when I decided to rape her.
All right, what happened after you raped her?
She didn't say a word. She put her clothes back on and got out and picked the papers up off the ground. I drove away in reverse. I got to the top of the hill and I realized her cell phone was in the car. So I wiped it off and drove back down to her. She came to the car and I rolled the window down and handed her the phone. And I told her, do not call nobody for 5 minutes, and then I left again. I could see when I was leaving, she sat down on the ground, and I realized I didn't have a mask on. And she can identify me, so I drove back again. When I got to her, she was laying all the way back with her legs bent up. She opened her eyes and I had the gun in her face. She said, I thought you were gonna let me go. She balled up and tried to cover her head. I shot her in the head and she just went still. I went back to the car and drove to James' house and picked him up. He didn't believe what I told him, and he wanted me to drive back to where she was.
Oh, man.
That's when James realized I was in deep trouble. We didn't take nothing from the scene. James told me to go to the car wash on Airport Boulevard. James helped me clean the car, and then I took James home, and he told me to call him later. That's when I told James I robbed and killed her. I didn't say nothing about raping her.
Is this the version we should believe, Mr. Meeks?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Deans, you wanted to add to your previous statements?
Tuesday morning, after it happened, James told me Ken did it. What I did leave out was that me and James went to Ken's house. Ken was in his room and he had the gun in his hand. This was after I went to James's house that morning.
That was Tuesday morning, the day after the murder.
Yeah.
Anything else about the gun?
Well, James went to AJ's house and Ken walked towards the soccer field at Fike. The helicopter was flying over Wilson Woods and across the soccer field. Ken jumped down in the ditch. The helicopter had just flown over. I was behind Ken and I had my bike in my hand. Ken had a bag and placed the gun in the ditch. Then me, Ken, AJ, and James left AJ's house, walking towards Ken's house. AJ asked him, "Where's the gun at?" And Ken said, "Right there." Later, I told Ken and James I heard a good way to get rid of a gun was to take it apart. And after that, James told me that Ken and this girl, Suzette, got rid of the gun out in the country.
In this recreation, you heard what investigators were being told about a crime of opportunity that kept escalating until Brittany was raped, then shot execution style to keep her from talking. You also heard details about a coordinated cover-up, a strategy for removing and destroying evidence, and a 3-day smokescreen that gave defendants time to think up alibis. As for James Johnson, we don't know what he said in his signed statements. That includes the signed statements from the friend, A.J. Horton, and Johnson's father. Many statements may only become available if Johnson's case goes to trial.
Kenneth did take James to see the body.
Yes, he did.
Around 3:45 in the afternoon, and in an area considered safe, Brittany Willis gets carjacked in the Brentwood Shopping Center parking lot. By 5 p.m., it's believed she's already been robbed, raped, and murdered at a nearby construction site, just a stone's throw from the home of a suspect, 17-year-old James Johnson. Two other suspects, Kenneth Meeks and Julian Deans, are friends with Johnson and also live near the scene. The 16-year-old Meeks lives with his mother on Tillman Road, right next to Fike High School, where he twice made the academic honor roll but dropped out. And just a bike ride away, 19-year-old Julian Deans, also a Fike High School dropout, lives alone in a rundown trailer backed up to a train track thoroughfare.
It certainly seems, that proximity played a role, at least in how the three suspects in this case came to know each other.
Mike Charbonneau works the Wilson Bureau for WREL News. He's covered Brittany's case since day one.
So this is Kenneth Meeks' home. This is where he lived, and he is actually only probably about 200 yards from the edge of the soccer field at Fike High School, where James Johnson spent a lot of time. He's told us, and we've heard from others, that he was very passionate about soccer and planned to play in college. So obviously it's a short walk from his soccer field just down the road to where Kenneth Meeks lives. Now kind of driving the path here again from Kenneth Meeks' home to the high school to the shopping center where Brittany was kidnapped, and now turning into the area where the crime scene is. You're right, it's all within a couple of miles. A lot of people have said, obviously it was broad daylight, things seem to happen so quickly. Well, they didn't have to go very far. James claims that he was sitting here in his living room when the crime occurred, and it wasn't until afterwards that he says that Kenneth Meeks came by the house here and picked him up in the stolen car, in Brittany Willis's car, or her parents' car that she was driving, and took him from this house and allegedly told him the story. And obviously what happened after that point, there are still a lot of questions, and there's a couple different versions of stories.
The changing stories, especially from Meeks, were causing problems and delays for everyone involved, including James Johnson's defense team. For nearly 2 years, they had to work around Meeks' first set of stories, accusing Johnson of the murder and rape.
Was he a liability in terms of his credibility?
Yeah, always, from the very beginning.
First matter of business this morning, Mr. Gaskins.
Johnny Gaskins was James Johnson's lead attorney for the 2.5 years he was charged with capital murder.
James turned the co-defendant in. Co-defendant got mad because James had turned him in and told the police, well, yes, I did it, but James was with me.
But throughout 2005, a series of DNA lab reports were coming back, linking only Meeks to the crime scene. Nothing matched Johnson. But also in 2005, Johnson's alibi and statements remain in question. The gun used to kill Brittany Willis isn't recovered. And all three defendants, Johnson, Deans, and Meeks, are indicted for the brutal crimes against Brittany Willis. And although the one witness in the case has recently died of cancer, her statements to investigators provide credible details matching the place of the murder, the description of the vehicle at the scene, and the time frame of the murder, between 4 and 5 p.m. The deceased witness, Charlene Godvey, had also claimed the young woman she saw at the construction site was being helped up by two young dark-skinned males and one lighter-skinned male, possibly Hispanic.
But it takes nearly 2 years for Johnson's case to break in his favor. On April 10, 2006, Kenneth Meeks strikes a deal, pleading guilty to murder in exchange for dropping the other charges. He gets life without parole for the murder of Brittany Willis.
Now, I understand the life part, but when they say life without parole, they're basically trying to say that you're in there, you're not going to get out unless you die, and that's the only way you're getting out.
The break comes when Johnson's lawyers find out Meeks has been privately changing his stories, telling his lawyer and psychiatrist in confidence that James Johnson had not assisted in the rape and murder after all.
We're not privy to what he has to say until he strikes the deal. Once his case is over, now he's fair game to me.
Then on April 26, 2006, 16 days after Meeks is convicted and sentenced, Johnson's defense team drives across the state to interview Meeks at the Western Youth Institute.
Code 3, inmate movement.
We interviewed him at the prison first, and he recanted.
As part of his deal, Meeks also helps investigators find the murder weapon. The SBI gun lab processes the Lorsen .380 semi-automatic, and on May 24, 2006, finds no DNA on the trigger guard.
Then, on July 31, 2006, now more than 2 years after Brittany's murder, a major turning point takes place at a two-day hearing. Meeks takes the stand to go on record saying he acted alone. A polygraph examiner hired by the defense provides results supporting his latest story. DNA findings that link only Meeks are submitted, and two relatives of the now deceased witness, Charlene Godvey, take the stand as hearsay witnesses and give conflicting accounts of what Miss Godvey said she saw.
Once that happened, then everything started coming apart.
Where's your case?
Not only is it his confession, there's no DNA, there's no physical evidence. That's what we have. That's a done deal.
Or is it a done deal? What begins to unfold is what leads to the public outrage about this case.
The first public mention we could find of Kenneth Meeks' story changing in favor of Johnson shows up more than 3 months after it happened. The mention appears midway through a Wilson Daily Times article dated November 7, 2006. Then, 6 months after that article, on May 5, 2007, the Wilson Daily Times publishes a handwritten letter sent from prison by Kenneth Meeks. He confirms his most recent story, that James Johnson was not involved in the rape and murder of Brittany Willis.
The letter from Kenneth Meeks in jail was definitely a turning point in this case, because we had all been asking a lot of questions from both sides, really, about where this case was going.
What made you write that letter, Ken?
Reading the newspaper and seeing how they kept putting him down when he's trying to build himself up and move on from that situation.
When Meeks' letter is published, it's approaching 3 years since the murder of Brittany Willis. Meeks is now a convicted murderer. Deans is out on bail, and Johnson is still in jail awaiting due process. That's when pressure outside the courtroom increases to a new level.
I said you need to be a member of the NAACP, 7 cents a day, because we need an organization that's more powerful.
Welcome back to NC Wanted. We're in downtown Wilson tonight looking into the case of Brittany Willis. One defendant, Julian Deans, has been out on bail since 2004. He's awaiting due process on charges of being an accessory after the fact of first-degree murder. His actions and statements have linked him to Johnson and Meeks since the day all three were arrested. And yet, as was pointed out in a Wilson Daily Times article, Julian Deans has remained a low-profile figure.
The fact that, it'll be 4 years this summer, and he still hasn't had his court date.
If they're gonna let one person go, and I'm not a racist, they're gonna let one person go, the white boy, why not let this black boy go? He's been in jail, like I said numerous of times, for 3 years.
white man, Julian Deans. He's awaiting his day in court on charges as being an accessory. What's your perspective on the case against Deans? Is he being treated the same as James Johnson in this case?
Well, you know, we have not really focused on that side, you know, the whole issue of accessory with the Julian Deans case. Of course, you know from the beginning, James was locked up for capital murder. Deans were accessory. I mean, that in itself, you know, shows a great deal of difference.
We checked court records, and unlike James Johnson, Julian Deans was never charged with murder and rape. He had a verifiable alibi the day of the murder, but did admit a role in hiding and destroying evidence. He also stands accused of giving false alibis for Johnson and Meeks. Shortly after he was charged, Dean was held in jail for 4 months under $1 million bond. On November 1st, 2004, his bond was reduced to $60,000 and he was released. His mugshot is the only photo we have, as we were unsuccessful in tracking him down for an interview. His lawyer told us he's fine with his client avoiding the spotlight and his day in court until matters are resolved with the other defendant.
That other defendant is James Johnson. For 3 years and 3 months, he sat at a Wilson County jail awaiting trial on charges of kidnapping, robbery, rape, and murder.
It was boring. I wanted to hurry up and take his course, but at the same time, you can't rush anything.
It was this 39-month time frame that sparked allegations of lack of a speedy trial, no due process, and a so-called rogue prosecutor hell-bent on trying James Johnson, allegedly without evidence.
Then, on September 24, 2007, after 39 months and relentless outside pressure, James Johnson is released on bail during a moment designed for maximum emotion.
We are here today with James Johnson. North Carolina has taken its first step to correcting itself. Come on, mama. Come on, daddy. And get your son and let's let him go.
The day Johnson was released, his case was moved out of Wilson and into the hands of a special prosecutor, Belinda Foster from Forsyth County. Foster eventually dropped all charges against Johnson, citing insufficient evidence to overcome reasonable doubt. But she tagged him with a new charge, accessory after the fact to first-degree murder.
How are you feeling about this?
You know, it's not the best situation in the working out slowly. I guess that's all I can say right now.
Brittany Willis's family expressed their hurt and frustration in a public letter. The family believed Belinda Foster caved in to outside pressure and special interests.
When the charges were reduced, I think the family felt at that point that they had to start speaking up some because they really felt like their part of the justice was starting to slip away in this case.
Tonight, nearly 4 years after the brutal crimes against Brittany Willis, a second special prosecutor has taken over to consider the accessory charge and review the entire case. Retired prosecutor David McFadden.
Well, the case file is about 4,000 pages. It fills 2 very large boxes. At the time of Brittany Willis's murder, it was an undeveloped subdivision. The main street out here was still dirt. This lane dead-ended down into the woods. It was wooded on both sides. During a foot search for Brittany Willis, the officers discovered her body lying on the left side, right at the edge of the woods line.
McFadden has no timetable for making any decisions. Meanwhile, 2 of the 3 original defendants, James Johnson and Julian Deans, continue their long wait for a possible trial.
Free James Johnson! Free James Johnson!
Make no mistake, the outside complaints have targeted only the James Johnson case. In 2007, the state chapter of the NAACP stepped in to adopt Johnson as a human symbol of a broken criminal justice system, biased against blacks and the poor.
Our position is that all the charges need to be dismissed and James needs to be honored as a hero.
What some meant for evil, God meant for good. James is our Joseph, and we present him now.
This hero worship of James Johnson doesn't sit well with the Willis family or their supporters.
The victim's family takes particular offense to that because whether or not James Johnson was responsible for Brittany Willis's death, her family thinks that there are many things that he did or that he was involved with that are anything but heroic.
We spoke with a close friend of the Willis family who wished to remain anonymous. This person told us, based on what the Willises were told, they don't believe Johnson killed Brittany. They do believe he was there when she was abducted, there when she was raped, and there when she was murdered, and he could have stepped in to save her, but didn't.
It appears that she was in the process of leaving Brentwood Shopping Center when she was approached by two of these individuals. It appears that she was forced from that location and then transported to this location where the homicide took place.
Talking with some of the investigators who were key in this case, while they haven't commented specifically, a lot of them have left me with the impression all along that they were confident in their investigative work and that they had the right people behind bars.
And so they've had this distortion all this time given to them. And it looks like we've come in, but we only came in to deal with the truth. Just like when I was down there, people were, the day that they did the second arraignment of this new charge, I mean, people were cursing and talking ugly.
Critical in
and fighting outside of the courthouse, in the streets, and in the media, and in the ballot box, and using every political lever we can think of.
What we were trying to do was prevent a lynching in the 21st century.
There's a fine line that they walk between watchdogging, which I think they need to do, and interfering or inciting conflict. And there's a fine line there that's easily crossed. I think it's maybe been crossed a couple of times.
If we see places where civil rights are not being protected, then we challenge and speak to those things. That is the work and the mission of the NAACP.
Reverend Barber was the one who got the media's attention.
The James Johnson case is a major focus right now in the nation with the national NAACP. We're going to see this case through. We have to.
James Johnson! James Johnson! Through a relentless campaign of news conferences, rallies, and petitions, the NAACP has gotten the attention of a U.S. Congressman, the North Carolina Attorney General, and the Attorney General of the United States. They also filed a complaint with the North Carolina State Bar, and their entire focus has been against one man, Wilson County Assistant District Attorney Bill Wolf.
This DA pursued him and lied to the public, lied to his family, polarized the community, kept this young man in jail under false pretenses for another 3 years.
Why he's being attacked, I think, is simply because he's the face of the prosecution in the courtroom. He's the easiest target, and I think he's also the person that they associate with that side of what's going on in the courtroom.
One of our allegations, of course, of the State Bar was that the DA had been insisting on this $1 million bond, when in fact the two young men went in together with Arthur Johnson, with James's daddy, and helped the police solve the case.
The culprit in this is Wolf. That's where the focus needs to be. That's where our complaint with the bar is. Wolf needs to be dealt with, the assistant DA that held this kid, because that DA had the authority when he knew he didn't have a case to man up and say, I don't have a case, this is the wrong kid, we've done wrong. We wouldn't be here if that had happened.
I think that their complaint would only be valid if we had a chance to bring everything to trial and to see all the facts. I seriously doubt that if Bill didn't have, or if the prosecution did not have evidence, facts, reason to want to bring this to trial, I don't think they would have been pushing for it all along.
I think Mr. Wolf believed that his evidence was sufficient. I'm not really critical of him. I didn't see him as a rogue prosecutor.
We want to make it clear that in our research, we found no evidence of wrongdoing on the part of Assistant DA Bill Wolf.
You'll see that the division is a racial division. The white people believe that they wouldn't have charged him if he didn't do it. The black people believe that he should have never been charged at all.
I think because one family is black and one family is white, and it seems that supporters of one family tend to be black and supporters of the other tend to be white. So I think sometimes when you see the images of these two different sides coming together in a courthouse or outside a courthouse arguing, I think some of that pops up.
We did not just say this is a race case, or this is a case that needs to be dealt with. It was after long hours with experts, people who've dealt with this over and over again, that we got involved and said there has to be a sense of justice here.
To restore faith that justice could be served, the Wilson County DA's office agreed to seek a special prosecutor from outside Wilson County, and the more serious charges against Johnson were dismissed. But he still faces the charge of accessory after the fact to first-degree murder.
But I would caution people to continue the reporting as though James and Kenneth did this general cleaning of the car. That's not what happened.
He shouldn't have helped clean up the car. That's illegal.
Kenneth did take James to see the body.
Yes, he did. And James never lied about that, but eventually Kenneth got out of there, and James said he thought he was coming home, but he went to the car wash instead. And, Kenneth, at that point told him, you need to go ahead, wipe your fingerprints off.
We never took the position that he was Mr. Clean.
James Arthur Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you've been charged in a warrant with accessory after the fact to first-degree murder.
Accessory after the fact is a very serious charge if it's accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. They would get time in prison if convicted, but that time would not be close to the amount of time someone would get for first-degree murder, life in prison.
The murder case has been dismissed, and he's been charged with the thing that we thought was the true issue all along.
But as Johnson awaits due process for the accessory charge, the complaints continue about those 39 months he was kept in jail.
The timeline, you've got about 23 months before Meeks arrived at what was then the fourth version of the events, and then recanted, obviously saying that Johnson had been involved at that point. That was 23 months after all that. So I think that when people say that Johnson had been in jail for 39 months, you can almost subtract the 23 from that.
In major cases, you have forensic lab results that it takes months. Sometimes it can be well over a year to get lab results back. So all those things can delay cases or add up to that 2 years or sometimes 3 years you're talking about.
I think it's strange that Johnson's attorney never filed a motion for speedy trial.
You're doing other cases, and suddenly a case is a year old.
In fact, Gaskins blames the prosecution for trying to give Johnson a speedy trial, knowing Johnson's defense team was seeking delays to manage a second case outside Wilson.
The judges, the district attorneys, they're the ones that did it. The so-called fix was in down there. James was going to have a trial that didn't resemble anything near what anyone would think might be fair. But they were able to use the scheduling power to schedule those cases back to back. It was obvious why they did it. Now, if you want to have a chance to win, you got to make sure that we keep the lawyer busy so that we can jam it down James's throat.
Sources close to the Willis family tell us they've always wanted James Johnson to have his day in court. Willis supporters say to them it's not about race, it's about accountability, and they've only kept silent out of respect for the prosecution and the Willis family. They add that if people want justice, a trial needs to take place.
You've got the tragedy with the murder, you've got the tragedy with the incarceration, and furthermore, if it never comes to trial, I think that could be almost as big a tragedy as the initial crime itself.
I don't think it's important to have his day in court if he's not guilty.
The years of frustration with this case have led to a deep divide in Wilson. In covering this story, we were often asked by Wilson residents, which side were we on?
A Wilson radio talk show host was taken off the air for criticizing local officials about this case. Then, on November 10, 2007, the Wilson Daily Times ran this front-page story about James Johnson being out on bail, awaiting trial for the rape and murder of soccer standout Brittany Willis. This photo of Johnson playing soccer in his yard incited a backlash of letters to the editor and pressured the editor to publish his own letter of apology to the Wilson community.
Ball is being presented by Mr. Randy Willis, Brittany's father.
To honor Brittany during this 4-year ordeal, Willis family supporters created an annual soccer tournament, aptly titled The Brittany. Our crew showed up under the Friday night lights to capture the highlights of the 2008 Brittany 4. 56 teams from across the state converged in Wilson.
Let's give these ladies a big round of applause.
This is a great way to honor Brittany.
Right. Really is. The Wilson community has come together and really supported our family and supported Brittany.
As Brittany's father, Randy, congratulated and hugged the winners, it was nearly impossible not to sense the loss of his daughter.
You can't help but think about what that family's going through. It's about whatever justice is for Brittany.
I go to her grave every time I come home. I go talk to her a lot. It was a shock. I couldn't believe it. I don't know, it's just been hard for everybody. Especially when it's, everything's still going on. Everything's not, resolved. I think about her every day, like walking on campus. I just wish that she could have had that experience to go to college. And, I have bunches of pictures of us, and every time I look at it, I think about her every day.
So in nearly 4 years and counting, there is still no closure. The heart of the controversy remains. The Wilson County DA's office kept James Johnson in jail for 39 months and held on to the murder and rape charges against him. From an outsider's perspective and without the benefit of seeing the complete case file, it appears that in the hearing on July 31st, 2006, recorded evidence pointed away from Johnson's physical involvement in the murder and rape of Brittany Willis. But as we've heard, of more than 4,000 pages of documents in this case, only a portion is public record. So unless James Johnson and Julian Dean stand trial, we may never know the reasons why Assistant DA Bill Wolf used his power to pursue the more serious charges against Johnson. Now, before we leave you, a special thanks to Mike Charbonneau and Kelsey Carlson for contributions to this show. Mike got the exclusive interview with James Johnson and shot most of the historical footage in this piece. Kelsey is a WRAL news anchor and reporter who got the exclusive interviews with Arthur Johnson and David McFadden.
For in-depth access to case documents, photos, and our exclusive master case timeline, go to ncwanted.com. And if you have any information on this case, call our hotline toll-free at 1-866-43-WANTED or email us at ncwanted@ncwanted.com. As always, you don't have to give us your name.
So until next time, remember, together we can fight to protect the quality of life we hold dear in North Carolina. I'm Gerald Owens. Good night.